Hello, network, and welcome to this edition of Look, Lead, Learn, where we'll be exploring the ways in which business leaders have navigated change to ultimately learn, adapt, and grow through what has been a very uncertain and fast-moving last few years for us all. My name's Lewis Morgan from Cedus, and today I'm joined by Elizabeth Clark, CEO and co-founder of Dream Agility, the Google shopping experts whose AI-driven platform sits between Google and the retailer's website to produce a market-leading ROI for their clients. Elizabeth, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your business and what you do there?
Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth. Nice to meet you. Actually, mechanical engineer by trade and got into this side of things fairly late in life. We're based up in Ramsbottom. We've got clients in the UK, the US, and America, and we service everything from tiny feeds to feeds that are 3.5 million products big. So it doesn't matter whether it's B2C, B2B, D2C, whether it's an air conditioning unit or a frock, we look at it.
Amazing. That's great. We'll delve into a little bit more detail about the ins and outs of the business as we progress, but let's just touch on the last few years a little bit first, shall we? So for those of you who haven't noticed, there's been quite a few things of note happening in recent times, obviously with the pandemic, working from home, instability in the markets, and just general disruption across the board. And this has obviously affected businesses of all shapes and sizes, including, I imagine, many of your clients. But what impact has this had on your business, like particularly when it comes to your overall strategy and the ways you work at Dream Agility?
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock. I don't think anybody could have predicted something like that happening ever. You put all your your emergency planning in place and this, that, and the other, and you just could never have imagined something like that would happen. And start with our clients. Some of our clients stopped paying us. Some of them shut their ads down. And you sit there and you go, oh my God, I wasn't expecting this, and now I'm not being paid. Am I going to have a business left at the end of this? Very quickly they did start paying again, and everything kind of got to normal. And then we were all sent home, and that was very strange. I think if you have a big call center and you've all worked together for years, or you are producing websites and you've all worked together for years, you can take that home. You can work from home. It was a disaster for us. We had 2 projects that lasted 6 months that just came to nothing, which if we'd been in the office, that wouldn't have happened. We either would have stopped them much sooner, or we would have made them work. So we took a decision fairly early on that when we went back to work the first time, that was it. We weren't finished again. We had customers who were providing essential services to essential service. So that made us an essential service if they couldn't sell their essential services. So we had clients that do engineering parts, pumps, heating pumps, things like that. So, you can't not provide people with pumps if their boilers are going to break and they're all stuck at home. So that was a great justification for us coming back to work. And we've been back in the office ever since, which has been...
Did you get a clap on a Thursday night or not quite?
There was no clapping went on anywhere. So it was a shock to the system, the whole lockdown thing. We went back to the drawing board very, very quickly. We've always been planners. So we went back to our plans and we said, right, well, we're going to have some new business goals. We had a flights booked out to the US. We've been to the US loads. We had a big trip planned. We were going to actually sort of put feet on the ground out there, and that was going to be the start of our American expansion. That all got cancelled and has never been back on the table since. We've not been able to get back out since. We decided we had to put enough money in the bank to cover us for a 6 to 12 month runway in case we ever got short of funds again. We've done that. We did that fairly quickly. So we've got a 14-month runway in the bank. And we wanted to focus more on, we got great technology, but actually let's sell more of it. So that was also came very much to the front of the agenda as well. And there was one project that I wanted to get properly nailed, and that was the only thing we didn't do that was on my list. We managed to do all of it.
Brilliant. So yeah, I mean that response then, by the sounds of it, was a little bit of a pivot in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And do you feel that was the sort of response you made to it was effective, and you got the results you wanted for in the end?
Yeah, absolutely. We gave ourselves new sales goals, which we've hit. We're doing record sales, which is fantastic. We wanted to expand in America. We have expanded in America without actually setting foot in America. 50% of our sales is now in America, which is phenomenal. We made some good finds actually, because we were told that once you go over 200 grand's worth of sales, or however many transactions, 200 transactions, whatever it was, we'd gone over it. And we were told you're going to have to pay an excess, which is the nexus thing is very, very complicated. It's all these different state taxes, which could be different within the states. There is software out there that does it for you. But I was convinced that we didn't actually trigger a nexus. And it took me an awful lot of digging, because everybody wants you to set up in their states. You've got to have a legal entity out there. Once you've got a legal entity, you've then got to have an accountant that knows the stuff in the States. My accountant knows all the UK stuff, knows a bit about the States. Nobody likes to get involved with the States because it's so complicated. Mm-hmm. They don't want the liability. You can be extradited to the States like that. Nobody wants that. So I would have had a whole other set of costs. And I was pretty sure that as long as I didn't have feet on the ground and I was providing the services from the UK, that we didn't have a nexus. It took me forever. I found an advisor in Florida in the end that said, no, you don't have a nexus. As long as you don't attend sales conferences out here, as long as you don't have a salesman out here, as long as you don't have literature or anything out here, which is fine. We don't even have literature in the UK, so that's not a problem. We'd be fine. So we've just continued growing in the States, and we'll start paying all the American taxes when we do eventually open an office. But we've saved all that expense and all that hassle and all that extra admin of doing that by just staying in the UK. So that was an added bonus, because we were all ready to go to Atlanta, get offices, do this. We've got a few clients in Atlanta already, so that was an obvious base for us. The flights backwards and forwards are pretty good. But, the added complication of we're not vaccinated. My father had the vaccine and died. So we don't want to touch it. We're just going to ride it out until it all blows away, and then we'll go over.
I mean, yeah, that's great. Obviously, I'm sorry to hear about your dad. But it's funny how these things turn out, right? Yeah. So you had all these plans to move over, and you would have got caught with all kinds of tax implications and problems setting up the office and getting boots on the ground over in the States. And now you're almost, like you said, reaping all the benefits of being there without all those added complications.
Yeah.
And that's not something that was in the plan at all to begin with. So
no, silly little things like using Calendly. We have different calendars for different parts of the States. And I used to sort of fill my diary with things to stop people booking things in, because their bank holidays are different to us. My husband said the other day, gosh, they're having Easter in America at the same time. I said, yeah, because Jesus was born at the same time over there, but they have like a different Mother's Day to us and things like that. So we've got to be very conscious of the holidays and things. The implications, like Thanksgiving, is huge over there. So we need to know what their diaries are. And we've even had people, the potential client said to me, Trump or Biden. And I'm like, what? He said there's no wrong answer. I know there's a wrong answer to this.
There definitely is, yeah.
So, we watch a lot of, we follow Fox News, we follow CNN, we try to keep up to date with what's going on in the US. I probably know more about what's going on in the US than I do in the UK, so we can sound informed when we're talking to our clients. We generally sort of know what's going on and things that are affecting them. We've got a client in Portland, and the violence out there has been horrific around Antifa and everything like that. You wouldn't believe what's going on. It's terrifying. So it's very different the way we work. Like I say, silly little things like setting up Calendly for different areas in the States means I don't have to fill my diary full of fictitious things to stop people booking things in when I don't want them to. Little things like that just make life so much easier.
Yeah, and that's probably something that you never would have considered before this kind of pandemic or remote working, or these tools have been out for a while, but I feel like they're really finding their use cases now with the way the market's moved. Like, you essentially can have that. You can have all your feeds set up to Fox News. You can almost live the time zone and the lifestyle of bit as if you were in America yourself. You can still have that connection with your clients, but now totally remotely. You don't have to go over there. Don't have to pack up and move. So that's something that's changed a lot. What do you think enabled you to be in that position to make that change as quickly as you did? Was there any sort of key aspects to the way you were working or the way you're operating the business that enabled you to make that jump rather than just give up hope?
But we had, like I said, we had a few clients in Atlanta anyway. And the thing about the Americans is they're very generous. So if you're doing a good job for them, they will tell everybody you're doing a good job for them. It's not like over here in the UK. It's quite different. It's almost like sort of willy waving. And even people in large organizations, they all have these mastermind groups that they go to. So once you get somebody in one mastermind group says, what an amazing job you're doing, it sort of gets round them. And before you know it, you're, one person to another person to another person. So it's grown very kind of organically just by doing a good job for one person. You do a good job for the next person. It just kind of goes from there. So we have a constant inbound flow of leads from the US, which is very nice due to the nice customers we have over there. And
Brilliant.
I never thought it was going to be, because it's not like that in the UK. It's very different over there.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of the speed of change in today's world. Obviously, you experienced some quite successful rapid growth in the States, and you had to change where you were going quite quickly. I also know you work very closely with Google, and you've mentioned before that they're prone to moving the goalposts, if you like, as often as and as dramatically as they fancy on the given week. And of course, this isn't exclusive to you and Google. Things are progressing, changing, moving all the time, and actually only seems to be getting faster, certainly from where we're sitting. How do you combat this, and what impact has it had on you, but also what implications do you think it's having on like the wider industry?
I think with Google, everybody tends to just use Google as it is. And the way we work is we've actually taken all the Google APIs and we've pulled them together our side, and we've built a platform. So we're not just taking Google's data and presenting it back to people in a nice interface that's easy to use. We're actually taking Google's data, we're running our machine learning over the top of it and giving completely different outcomes and pushing that back up to Google. So we do have something that's very different to what you get if you were using Google. If you were the likes of Bing, or Microsoft Advertising, they call it now, you have to copy exactly what Google's done, because if you don't do what Google's done, nobody's going to use your product. The challenge with everybody doing the same thing is you all get the same results. So we have to make sure that what we're doing is smarter than what everyone else is doing with the Google stuff to give completely different and better results. So it's quite disruptive what we're doing. Some people don't get it. So even though we do an audit and we'll say, right, well, we've looked at your account, we can see there's this opportunity or that opportunity. The big challenge you've got is in all the accounts we've ever looked at, only 5% of keywords have ever converted, which people can't quite get their heads around, because they go, I've got tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of keywords in here and you're telling me only 5% work. Yes, that's true. And only 3% of your advertising spend converts, which means 97% doesn't work. So we spend our time optimizing the stuff that works and the stuff that doesn't work. So as opposed to just focusing on, because Google runs that whole industry, and we have to be ready to move with anything they throw at us. They've just released completely new APIs. We've worked on the same 3 APIs for years. They've totally changed them out, and it's doing some mad stuff at the moment. So I imagine the engineers at Google are very busy right now. So you literally, you're dealing with something that Google to us feels like sometimes it's falling apart at the seams. It does some things that can't be explained, aren't in their rules, shouldn't be happening, but that doesn't help my clients, it doesn't help me. We've all got to jump in and get stuck in and figure out what on earth's going on and put solutions in place to fix it. We've found things that are wrong with Google that have been wrong for years, that have never been fixed. So we can't rely on Google to fix something that's broken or has never worked. We have to find solutions for that. So we have a roadmap, and overall we know where we want to be. But as and when something crazy happens with Google, we all have to jump in and go, right, well, that's been pushed down to the bottom now, or this new product's been released by Facebook, or this new thing's come out there. So we're constantly going back in and having to look at the roadmap and where we are and what all the project costings things are in order to be able to see where we're going with that. You've got a lovely little tool that you showed me the other day that would have been so much useful with my investors many years ago, to have had that and be able to plot everything against it. Would have been marvelous. But yeah, we're constantly going back and prioritizing what we've got, literally almost on a weekly basis. We do it in sprints. So we'll say, right, this has been prioritized now, we won't stop until we finish that sprint, and then we'll go back in and see what we can slot back in. And sometimes things change so much you think, well, actually that's just off the board altogether now. We've also had technology that comes back around, things that we thought were done actually now have a new competitive advantage where Google's changed things. So it's just a continual iterative process of looking at the roadmap and adjusting our priorities.
Great. Yeah, it's definitely that rapid learning and iteration is just so important, especially when you're in these sort of fast moving markets, which we're kind of all finding ourselves in now. It's interesting what you say about having your roadmap, but then as soon as something happens, jumping on it straight away. And that kind of principle of jumping on things early, or addressing problems early before they become much bigger further down the line, is really key. And it's you mentioned there our kind of view of strategic divergence at Cedus and the sort of visualizations we can produce. And one of the analogies we use is, if you've got an asteroid coming to Earth and it's 1 million miles away, you probably only need to flick it and it will go off course by 1 degree, but by the time it reaches Earth, it'll be hundreds of miles away from you. If you leave it till it's entering the atmosphere, you've got to throw 10 nukes at it and kick it off at a 90 degree angle just for it to graze you. So there's obviously a principle in Agile of sort of failing fast and failing early and learning and iterating. But I think it's more than that, right? Because Agile is often very near-minded, and there's not always that link between, yes, there's sort of ruthless prioritization in the short term, but there's not that link between that action in the short term over the next 2-3 month time horizon, or even over the course of the sprint, to how that actually impacts your overall strategy when you're looking 2-3 years into the future, for example. So I'm sure there's things that Google have changed, or like you said, features you could have essentially discommissioned, that are now proven very valuable because you still have that higher vision and that higher strategy that all the work you do is linking into.
We try and be as commercial as possible as well. There's sometimes you see a bit of CV building going on. Somebody wants to do a particular project because it'll look good on their CV, or somebody wants to work with a particular technology because that'll look good on their CV. Is it right for the business? Is it right for the department? So you've got to sort of juggle all those things as well, and sort of find out that, we can't just do things because people find them interesting. That would be lovely, but it's not very commercial. And software developers obviously aren't often very commercial because they're balls deep in the code. So it's bringing that balance to making sure the work is interesting, making sure the work is valuable, and making sure we can commercialize what we're doing. We can sit and invent technology. We have far too much technology because we've always just built things. So, but like I say, since lockdown, we've been a lot more disciplined and focused on, right, how can we monetize it more, and how can we make it, well, it's already very robust, but how can we just make it tighter? That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's all too easy, especially in like a really tech-driven firm or really tech-driven environment, to, once you begin the process, to just get lost in the doing and the day-to-day, and not really keeping track of that overarching vision you had at the beginning, where it all seems so perfect and simple, but also, like, often unknowingly, unfortunately, ending up further away from your strategic targets off in the future somewhere. Right, so you've always got to have that connection between the work you do and your strategic goals. And without plugging our framework too much over the course of this, we do that obviously, as you know, through data and modeling, and so we were able to map each increment of value directly back to the outcomes themselves. I was just going to ask you, because obviously you market yourself as a very data-driven company as well, with a very data-driven product, got very comprehensive algorithms and machine learning within your organization. But what role does data have to play at Dream Agility internally? Are you applying that kind of scientific approach to your own business plan, or are you, basing decisions off gut and instinct? Where does that play?
We've got lots of accountants around us. So our CTO is an economist and an accountant. We have a management consultant who is an accountant. We just hired a new board director who is an accountant. So everybody loves numbers. We set Xero. I've worked with Xero from the get-go. We had an accountant that didn't use Xero. They used Sage, but it was a desktop-based thing. And if, for heaven's sake, no idea how difficult it was trying to find an accountant that will work with Xero. But once we've got Xero, we can set up all our cost codes. We can do all our different budget lines in it. We can do all our scenario, all that sort of stuff. So having lots of accountants around, they like to work in Xero. So we're very driven by money as well as by data. There is a bit of a mismatch with where your technology really comes in between sort of the business plan. You've got stuff going on with the Asana and GitHub and that sort of thing, and then you've got Xero. but there is that kind of missing gap in the middle that you guys plug very nicely. But it tends to be because we are not backed, we are self-funded. Every penny we make goes back into the business. We're always looking at zero in the data in there.
Yeah, I think that the key, obviously, you're very commercially driven now, and part of that being commercially driven is having a focus on money and pounds in the bank. But it is all about having that common currency that bleeds down from what's really important to you as an owner, which is obviously pounds in the bank account at the end of the quarter, and what's important to the delivery teams who are actually delivering the product and delivering the vision on the ground. So they need to see that connection between the work that they're doing and how that affects the overall mission, vision, and contribution to outcomes within the business. And I think that encourages a high performance culture, right? Because, I've been in jobs where you maybe don't see the impact of your work you're doing, and it could be quite tiresome. And yes, they might, throw some supermarket vouchers at you or some bonuses for kind of the work you do. But especially in a startup, I think that alignment to the vision of the strategic board is so important when you're carrying out that strategy as a delivery team or as an engineer.
Yeah, we brought out an EMI scheme as well, because we think it's very important that people can see a route through what that route, what the work they're doing is, how is that going to be tied to an exit, and how is that going to be tied to the amount of money they get at the end of it. I did one of these years ago, and we made millionaires overnight for about half a dozen people in the office, which was amazing considering how long ago it was. And we've gone to great lengths to try and explain to people what it is, how it works. It's still funny, some of the questions that get asked, like, is it going to cost me any money? No, it's not going to cost me any money. You have to sign a form agreeing to accept the free shares, which made everyone a bit suspicious. Why am I signing a form to agree to accept free shares? And I said, it's just so that I can have the legal right to deduct NI and everything off you in order to pay the tax man, because it's not going to cost you a penny. All happens in the day. And then we've also got questions, things like, well, what if the new buyer doesn't honour it? Well, it happens in the day. It'll all happen as part of the deal. We're not going to keep you here and then not get your shares. The tax man wouldn't allow that. So, it's funny how people's thought processes go, but we're trying to make sure that the salaries and the short term and the long term things all align with what we're trying to do as a business, which is not always easy, but I think we're getting there.
No, it's not always easy, and it's obviously much easier when you can all be in the room together and you can have these discussions. But doing it remotely, we've always worked remotely the last 7 years, so long before the pandemic. Like, we've managed to build in some processes that hopefully kind of keep that alignment within the teams, even though we're also far apart. But I think having that commercial aspect to all the work you do, whether it be for an employee having share options for an exit or sort of revenue targets as a business, I think having that common currency of pounds in the bank for everybody is a really powerful tool. And I think you mentioned before about like CV building projects, and we'd often call these like pet projects. And I think if everybody thought like that and just considered the impact it had on the final result, which would be pounds in the bank, then maybe they wouldn't automatically jump off to another new project. Maybe they'd be able to compare. So the problem you get is they don't compare apples with apples. They compare the benefit that this might have to their CV or the benefit this might be for whatever else. But they can't weigh that up against taking that resource off the things in the business that are delivering the value.
It is difficult because there are things where people suggest something and it's a lot of technical debt, and you think, and then another way will be, let's do this fast and dirty, but it's going to cause you pain further down the line. So it's just a constant evaluation process to get to the right answer for everybody. And we do encourage people to sort of, is there a way of tying up your desire to wanting to do something new on your CV to what we're trying to do as a business? One of the guys once asked me about what is tech for good? And I said, it's got nothing to do with Google, let me tell you there. But it's, if you can invent something that will cure something or do something wonderful. And he went away and he came back in and he said, visual AI, I could use that to detect breast cancer. And I went, that's excellent, but too far removed from what we're doing. And obviously, something like that, the visual AI is pretty cool. And for people working from home, we had a lady working for us out in the Philippines, and she was on this screen monitor thing, and she got wise very quickly to the fact that if she just kept the mouse moving, the screen monitor would stay on, and she would, it all went towards her hours. We ended up using the visual AI to look at what the screen, to compare the pictures that were being taken by the screen monitor, to discover she wasn't doing any work at all. She was just she just had something moving her mouse around. So we found all sorts of applications for our visual AI, and breast cancer is one of them, and screenshot things the other thing. But you'd be surprised what comes out. And actually, one of the best parts about our visual AI isn't the visual AI itself; it's the labeling tool. It has all kinds of applications, which is very exciting and could be a completely different business. But if you take your eye off the ball and you start going down too many roads, you spread yourself very thin. So you've got to be quite conscious of where your focus is.
Absolutely. I think if you keep sort of ROI at the heart of it all, that tool capturing what the lady was doing in the Philippines, you could produce an ROI assertion out of that, right? Because how much is it costing you to have a doing nothing all day versus moving on to somebody else, and the benefit that they can achieve. So as long as you have a way of measuring the impact, I think you can make those prioritization decisions, and you can kind of qualify out what's commercially viable and what's a pet project or just something we're doing because it's fun and interesting. And that comes up a lot in tech, right? Because everyone's doing cool stuff, particularly in machine learning. It's a really exploratory field. A lot of people are really enthusiastic about the technology and they just want to build, but they need to be able to link that back to the commercial outcomes of the business at the end of the day.
Yeah, actually, the CTO is one of the worst for this, because he would go to the head of development and say, "Do you think it could do this?" And they go, "Yeah, I think it can." And then before I knew it, they'd be off running, doing stuff that wasn't part of the plan. That was just a "I wonder if" type things. We stopped all that. It all has to be agreed. There's no "I wonder if," because they'll just run off and do it.
Got to keep them in check.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's also something I wanted to mention briefly, something not entirely unique, but certainly rare about the way you operate. And that's that you've made the decision not to hire a sales team or not to proceed with a sales team. Obviously, you've been successful, you've raised revenue, you're trying to scale the business, and to some, I imagine that would seem slightly counterintuitive, right? Obviously, like the textbook model, often once you've got a working product or proposition for people, is to throw lots of money at it, lots of resource into selling it as fast as possible. What's kind of been the thought process behind taking the route you've taken?
I think what we're trying to do is we're very specific about who we're targeting and what we're targeting, so that makes life a lot easier. Unfortunately, the only people who have the actual answer to what I'm looking for is Google. So we have to make lots of proxies in terms of the size of the company, the age of the company, the number of people, the turnover, and able to sort of guess what their spend would be. So we have sort of multiple threads going on. We used to do a lot of speaking before the pandemic, and we got work from that. Plenty of networking, that sort of thing. And it's about moving things further down the funnel. I have no interest in somebody trying to find lots of mud to fling at a wall. We could literally fill our diary all day long with people who want demos, and they're not the right people for us. So it's a complete and utter waste of time. So by being very, very focused on who we want to speak to, knowing exactly what our product does and who it works best for, working with other parties as well. So people who have access to those sorts of people, who have a business model that works around that, that's great. We're working with a company called Greyhead Works at the moment, and they've got us into a load of big high street retailers right at the end of the funnel, which is brilliant. It saves me 6-12 months worth of contacting, meeting, digging, I just rock up and present. It's much easier. I'm not an idiot. I know eventually we're going to reach a stage where we're going to have some salespeople, because once you've got the sort of big ones that you want, you need to have a lot more further down the tree. To be fair, the sort of companies we do best with are the ones that, in terms of the very fast to move, very fast to convert, are these sort of owner-managed business that turn over between 10 and 100 million. that I could sell to those all day long. Those guys, no numbers, they're no nonsense, and when you can show them what you can do, they're fantastic. So I would take, I shouldn't say this, I would take them over a big high street retailer any day of the week, just because they're so easy to work with. They have no funny preconceived ideas because they haven't got Google chatter in their ear. There's a bit of Google chatter, but you know, they're very keen to work with you. We've got one client in particular, or two, three, that don't have anyone that works in paid search, and they turn over 9 figures, so which is a lot of money.
Yeah, blimey.
Yeah, one of them in Australia. We made life so difficult for their biggest competitor. It's like a David and Goliath thing for their biggest competitor, that they actually sold their website, and our client bought it. And when they first took it over, the ROAS was tiny. They were making a tiny, it was no wonder they shut it all down. It was horrendous. And we grew that 7 times growth within first 3 months, something like that. So
That's
yeah, I
fantastic.
mean, there's some great stories out there, and these businesses are absolutely, like I said, they're great. He's right; he's an economist, so he gets on very well with my husband, who's also an economist. So the two of them sit and plan world domination together, which is great because you get such a buzz from working with your clients, especially when you know what their end game is and what they're up to and what they're trying to achieve. Even things like how much space do they have in their operation. If they're running out of space and they can't store things, then you have to look at high margin things, or things that are small and easy to store, or new product lines and things. So we get quite involved with what our clients do. It makes the job really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about there is knowing your customer,
Mm.
right? And I think what that enables you to do, especially as a small business, right, is be really lean with the work you're doing, and like you said, you can go straight to the end of that funnel. There's no big sales blow, or you can have those high impact conversations very quickly, and actually convert them much quicker than perhaps building a large sales funnel and trying to drive as much stuff through it as possible. You get to have those high impact conversations very
Mm.
quickly. And so, yeah, I think what that really enables you to do is kind of grow sustainably,
Yeah.
right? Because you haven't got all this additional wastage that's you got sometimes you have too large of a burn rate, and like you'll be in those positions where like you said, fortunately you've built up 14 months of runway now, but perhaps you wouldn't have been able to do that if you'd had 10 salesmen, right? So it's not always easy, but I guess it is probably what all startups and scale up should be striving for. Leaders are often put in a position where they've grafted and kind of got an idea off the ground, but then all of a sudden, particularly if they've been funded, they've got a big bag of money. They need to spend it. It's not always clear how to allocate it, and often then it does get misspent, or like we said, you end up with a very bloated or lopsided business that's hard to manage, and then often that can lead you into a worse place than you were before you got the money or before you hired the sales team, right? So what would you say your kind of key tips and advice is on making sure that you scale your business sustainably, even perhaps through funding rounds?
Well, it's one of these things. I listened to a talk by the lady from Green and Blacks, the chocolate place, and they've grown their
Mm-hmm.
business really nicely organically. But they said taking a load of funding enabled them to grow it much faster. And obviously, it's a big high street brand now. And it sort of made me think: what's important for me? And certainly, pre-lockdown, post-lockdown, my values have completely changed. I want to grow as much revenue as possible with as lean a team as possible. If you look at how much spend we've got going through our account, you'd expect us to have 80 staff. But we've got so much technology we don't need to. If you look at Twitter, at the point where they only had 15 people and they sold for an absolute packet. So it's completely doable. And it's about how much time you've got, how much of yourself you're prepared to give, and how good can you build the networks around you. We did try salespeople early doors because we had investors and they wanted us to have salespeople. I think there was a naivety on my part and a lack of experience on my part with regards to how you manage salespeople and what your expert. I thought they were like engineers; they would just get on and do it. I think doing it again, I would do it very, very differently. And I would have a sales manager in. You can't expect a salesperson to be the sales manager. I see agencies who are like a third of their staff are business development. You've got 150 people, 50 people work in business development. what sort of cost is that? I mean, that's just massive. That's a tremendous cost base you've got to manage there. There's got to be a better way of doing it than that. And I think it is about, planning out all your partnerships and your all these little things. So rather than just having one big thing to rely on, like a massive sales force, is all your partnership networks that you can get through. Like I say, we've got networks in the US we never planned to have. We never expected to get, we didn't know even existed, that have turned out to work really, really well for us. And that just the US is so big. A small company in the US is a big company over here. So, looking at the size of opportunity as well, you've got to balance up. If I win one company in the UK, or if I win 5 companies in the UK, it's the same as winning one company in the US. It's those sort of trade-offs, and one company is much easier to manage than 5 companies. And also culturally, the Americans take a lot less stroking than the Brits. In the big retailers, you've got people sat there and they've got nothing to do all day other than watch you. So you have to have people around to answer their calls and play to their whims and all that sort of thing. Whereas in the US, they just want you to deliver. That's all they're interested in. You send them a report saying another record month, and you get a one-word answer back. Awesome. That's it. You can do a lot more of that kind of business with a lot less headcount. So, it's looking at where you can sell to people, what is the size of the opportunity, and what is the resource going to be. I can scale technology, can't scale people. So we've always got that at the back of our mind when we're sort of looking at expanding sales.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and it's interesting what you said about kind of almost forcing yourself to hire a sales team because you had investors and you thought that was the right thing to do, and there is an element of appeasing investors, especially if you're taking on large funding rounds. But investors also, they look at metrics like revenue per employee, and that a lot of people might consider that much more important than having 40% of your staff in business development, for example. So there's plenty of metrics to look at, but the important thing is that you're making high value decisions for your customers, and your customers as in the clients that you work for, but also your customers as in your investors, right? Because they've put money into the business, they're expecting money out, and if you keep the business conversation about ROI in whatever you do, then I think it keeps you on the straight and narrow and ensures all of the work you're doing, whether you make the decision to hire a sales team or whether you don't, you have that data behind you to kind of confirm or validate whether that's the right decision or not. And it's not all just done on a sniff test or because you thought that's what you had to do because you got investment.
I think the thing with investors, they will push you to spend money. They really will push you to spend money. I think that a lot about, if you look at all the accelerators out there, we've been on some really good ones. We've done Coca-Cola in Atlanta, the first British company to be invited to do that. We've done Galeries Lafayette in Paris, again, the first British company done. Showroom Privé, first British company to do that one. So we've done some really very high quality accelerators, and the whole time they're asking you to get more investment, get yourself into Hock a lot more, and then they throw all this wellness at you and mental health stuff at you. Actually, the one thing an investor wants you to be is unstable. That's the only conclusion I can get. They want you to be as financially vulnerable as possible. I look around at some of the guys who got pushed out over lockdown, good businesses, they'd put their hearts and souls into them, they'd raised money, businesses looked okay, investors pushed them out. Some very, very high profile ones, some, they're turning over hundreds of millions, down to people who just raised another 5 million and they were being pushed out left, right and centre. Something we're doing at the moment is we're buying a property and we're going to stick it in a SIP, which is a self-invested pension or something or other. And then if you look, that's what Matt Moulding's done. That's why the city hate him. So the Hut Group, their share price has gone. And what he's done is he's borrowed millions of pounds from Warrington Council in order to buy the land that the Hut Group sits on, and he charges them 20 million a year in rent. I know, it's genius, isn't it? When really, we should all be doing it. So for what we've paid in rent over the last 5 years, we could have bought this building. So we're looking to buy a building and then we will lease it back to the business. And then obviously the rent goes back into my pension. So I've got a lot more financial security. No one's ever spoken to me about this before, ever. You ask your accountant or your solicitor, they all buy their buildings, they all stick them in a pension. Why is this such a big secret for entrepreneurs? Because they want you to be vulnerable, they want you to be financially unstable, they want you to be hungry to do well, but that's what causes all the mental health issues. Everyone's panicked all the time about everything. But if you knew your finances were all right and you weren't going to lose the roof over your head, that's another thing they don't tell you. You can stick your house in trusts and all sorts of things. No one can get anything ever. It's brilliant. So I've really opened my eyes in the last few months with regards to the financial options that are available to help me in the longer term, more security for my family, but also good for the business as well. So, who wants to spend money on a property you don't own? But even in these accelerators, you've got all the big property companies coming in going, yeah, get this temporary space. You're going to expand by millions of people. So you pay a premium for a smaller space so that you can move up to a bigger space. How many startups grow that quickly? They don't tell you. How many fall by the wayside? What is the likelihood of you needing to go from sort of space for 10 people to space for 200 people? And it's also, your location is very important as well. If you're out in the sticks where we are, there is no property companies out here. There's none. So you've really got to make do yourself. And I refuse to spend money on a property I don't own. So we're going, like I say, we're going to buy a place and we're going to stick it in a SIP. We're going to do all these very grown up financial things, and we'll all be quitting.
I think what you're talking about there is not, and a lot of startups fall into this trap, right? Because a lot get funded and not a lot make it. Okay, so they all get caught up in the hype, and it's kind of perpetuated by these accelerators and these property companies who get involved in the process. They're caught up in the hype of, these are all the things we've got to do. It's a bit of a whirlwind. Let's throw everything at it. Work ourselves to the bone. Let's make something huge of this, without any real footing in reality or what it is they're actually delivering or know what they're doing. I think what you're talking there with all these sort of tax schemes and financial stability measures and things like that you're putting in place is taking yourself out of that bubble back into the real world, sort of having a moment to think and coming up with smart solutions to the problem and really placing your feet firmly on the ground so you don't get caught up in that sandstorm.
There's I think when you're younger, there's not actually that many young entrepreneurs. They're all sort of in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. They're all a bit on the older side. And once you're older, you've got things to lose. And if somebody wants to PG your house, you're going down a very sort of dark lane there. And if you then start to think, well, can I have a bigger house? Because is that, should I do that? Should I not do that? Well, actually, if you stick it all in a trust, nobody can touch it. So people can love to see you all they like. And it's about protecting yourself, protecting your assets, making sure that whatever happens, everyone's going to be okay. And that when everything works out great, double okay. So rather than sort of throwing mental health at it, let's throw some financial sort of stability at it, and then your mental health will be absolutely fine. I don't think the last thing we need is, if we've got some proper planning going on, so everybody knows what they're doing and how they're doing it, and are they on their critical path or not? Are they going massively off, and are they going to miss everything in 2 years' time? If you've got that sorted out and you've got your finances sorted out, you do a bit of exercise and don't drink too much coffee, your mental health will be absolutely fine.
That's the plan. That's what we all strive for. So amazing. Well, I'm slightly conscious of time, so unless there's anything else you'd like to cover, I'd thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Talking to you too.
I know we're both very fond of kind of networking and connecting with other leaders. So I don't know if you'd like to let people know how they can get in touch, if they'd perhaps like to learn more about yourself.
LinkedIn's the best place to go. I think my profile now says you can only follow me. That's nonsense. You just hit the connect button. Come and say hello. If you're ever in Silicon Rami up in north of Manchester, pop by. We have some great restaurants here. Always interested to speak to other technology companies or anybody who wants my technology for that matter. If you're a retailer or you're an owner manager looking for a great big boost in your sales, then we'd love to speak to you.
That's great. And I'd urge anybody who's kind of wanting to optimize their ad spend or their paid search to reach out to Elizabeth, because they're doing some really interesting things in the space. So we're trying to cap these interviews with kind of some golden words at the end for people to take away and kind of think about with them and digest in their own time. So other than make sure you've got a bloody good accountant, by the sounds of it, what's the best single piece of advice you would give to
the best bit of advice I would give is have a plan. and stick to it. And if you're coming off your plan, have a very good reason for coming off your plan and mark your critical path through it so you can see when you're destined for abject failure or not. And just always make sure you've got money in the bank.
Brilliant. So yeah, perfect. Thanks for your time, Elizabeth, and let's catch up again soon.